Good, whatever time of day it is that you're joining me here on Consequences of Communication Podcast, episode 13, Building Relationships Down the Road. My name is Tyler. I'm going to be your host today, and I am really glad that you are joining me on this podcast. I think it's going to provide some insights. This is also looking ahead if you're single. So if you're single, this is going to be looking ahead. If you're newlyweds, this is going to be looking ahead. And if you're already married in this spot, hopefully you can understand where I'm coming from, or incorporate some of these ideas into how y'all's marriage works. But remember, open, honest, loving, straightforward, clear communication is the key to every successful relationship. Clearly state what you want, clearly state where you want this to go, and be willing to compromise, because if you're the only one building the road with no input from anybody else of your lives together, the other person's probably going to end up miserable. But if you build brick by brick the road together, you're building it together and going in the direction that both of you would enjoy, especially with each other's company. And living life alone is kind of miserable. That was kind of a tangent. So today we're finishing up the series of building relationships with Down the Road. This is pretty much the end of the relationship spectrum that I've been building up to now. The series we're ending it with romantic relationships. This includes having unrealistic expectations, the honey-do list, and changing circumstances. Those are the 3 points that we're going to go over here today. The question I have for you, actually a couple questions I got for you before we get started, is what comes to mind when you hear the term down the road in relation to life? Do you imagine a perfect life? Or did your significant other have any input in your perfect life? Or is it just what you want and you're trying to fit them into a mold that's not them? All right, so let's get into it. So down the road, to me, means some time has passed in your relationship, and what does that look like in the future for you? So you're imagining yourself and your relationship 2, 3, 5, 10, 15, 30, 50 years down the road. And of course, you make those adjustments. It has to be a malleable plan, which means it can move, or a flexible plan. That's probably a better thing. So it has to be a flexible plan for you down the road, so that are off of your first point doesn't throw off, or your first check-in in like 5 years, it doesn't throw off your 50-year plan that badly, but it's your choices with your spouse on where that moves. So life is unfair, but that also means that we can take advantage of it, right? Because a lot of times we think of, oh, life is unfair, all these bad things are happening to me. Well, through all the bad things that are happening to you, if you learn lessons from that and constantly learn, you're going to be able to use that later on in life as an advantage in your field, like in your situation in the future, to make things start working for you. But you have to have a good attitude about it. You have to understand that you need to keep learning and lessons learned, and make sure you don't repeat the same mistake, because otherwise you're just going to get stuck in a rut in life. And that's a personal journey along with romantic relationship journey, or even journeys with friends. So unrealistic expectations. I'm pretty sure we've all had jobs or tasks that normally take a set amount of time, but our boss wants us to get it done in half the time, but you can't do that because he still wants you to do the task by yourself that takes 2 hours, but he wants it done in 1 hour, or she wants it done in 1 hour. And you're like, dude, why are you not listening to me? Like, that is completely unrealistic expectation to have of me, because you're setting me up for failure. And, so it's that kind of thing. The same thing happens in marriage and other relationships. Having the mindset inside of a marriage is setting yourself up for disappointment, extreme disappointment. One of the things that I found is the biggest cause of that is not having open, honest, loving, straightforward, clear communication. Because if somebody is dropping hints, typically women drop hints instead of just flat out saying what they want or beating around the bush. I'm pretty sure we're all aware of that, but guys are prone to it too. Women just have the stereotype of actually there's a comedian, I can't remember his name, otherwise I'd give him credit. But he's on Dry Bar Comedy. One of his bits was how lawyers ruined America for kids on playgrounds. How he got dry ice, put it in a jar, and watch it explode. It's that comedian. So if you want to look him up, you can. He's hilarious. But he had a bit where he's talking about his marriage and the highest form or the highest level of communication. Is that your shirt on the floor, or are these your shorts on the floor? Asking the woman, asking the man, and then he's like, "Well, I sure hope so. Otherwise, I'm gonna have a few questions of my own." Instead of like, "Hey, can you please pick up your short? Make sure they get in the laundry basket," because that's a lot easier. It's gonna make life a lot easier. Less friction that way. But if you're constantly doing things like, "Hey, are these yours?" instead of asking to do something with them, but you're just asking about them, then that's a way to continuously set up yourself for disappointment in the future and falling into those habits that are going to be harder to break the longer they go. The best way to eliminate these unrealistic expectations after pulling everything down is trust, which, it's kind of the background focus or the background mechanic of open, honest, loving, straightforward, clear communication being the key to every successful relationship. So you have to be open, honest, loving, straightforward, and clear. And all of those, like if I'm having a discussion with you or I'm in a relationship with you, not just romantic, but any kind of relationship, that's what I'm going to give you is open, honest, loving, straightforward, clear communication as best as I possibly can. And I'm going to trust that you're going to be doing the same. So there's a bridge of trust between that. So if someone asks you to do something in half the time and get the same result without additional help, be open, getting their feedback about what is acceptable. Like, okay, so you want me to do this 2-hour task in 1 hour. It usually takes me 2 hours to do. I can try and speed it up, but my quality may drop in whatever this task is a little bit, but I could probably get it done in 1.5 hours. That's going to be the fastest, unless you just want like this work that I'm going to be doing to be completely wasted by the severe lack of quality in this product in order, and then I'm going to build this product in 1 hour like you want, and then it's going to go to quality assurance, and then they're going to kick it back, and I'm going to get in trouble for it. I'm not going to do that. Instead of I'm not going to do that, is that something that you want? Is this the outcome? Is this the desired outcome, or is the desired outcome to have products not get kicked back to us from quality assurance? And then there may be another conversation piece about that of having your boss watch or you walk through your boss through the steps of putting everything together, whatever that looks like. And I'm being vague because I don't have any specific examples, but that's the best one I could come up with. If you're the one being asked to do something, have courage to speak up about what is realistic expectation for this task, kind of like just how I went over. Both sides need to trust what the other side is saying. The side that has to do the items or do the tasks needs to make sure they are being clear with their current abilities. For example, the average put together of this product is 2 hours and 15 minutes. It takes skilled people to do it in 2 hours, but new people it might take 2.5 hours, hence why the average is 2:15. So if the boss asks for a new person to do this in 2 hours, the fastest that I've done this is 2 hours and 20 minutes. Like I'm getting more proficient every time that I do that. So that's my goal to get to that point, but it's going to take time to get to that point to maintain that same level of quality. Another example of this is specifically in a romantic relationship or within the context of marriage is cleaning the kitchen. Somebody's in charge of cleaning the kitchen, which is in a similar messiness to the prior week and so on and so forth. And the average takes about 1.5 hours, but you have a head cold today and are moving slow than planned for 2 hours. So you have to adjust your time and planning based on the current conditions. And this may be getting a little bit too logistical for some people. Bear with me, there's a point to it. 2 hours or so to do the same work done, but coordinate that with your spouse, especially if you have plans after. Like whenever this podcast comes out, which should be about 4:30 Central time. If you're listening to it then, and this podcast takes 30 to 40 minutes, which is typically my goal in that time frame, so you take time to listen to this podcast. But if for some reason I start going on to 1.5 hours, and you see that before you start playing it, but you really you focus on listening to this podcast, so you have to spend 1.5 hours listening to the podcast, not really doing anything else. You're not going to start your podcast or start this podcast listening to it 40 minutes before you have to go to work, or like 40 minutes before bedtime, or 40 minutes before you have to take your kids to the soccer game or soccer practice, or whatever the case may be. Like you just need to be planning that out. So this may still cause friction, but you still shouldn't be upset what was done or not done by the time you have to leave. Specifically for the head cold, not necessarily the podcast. It was just an off the wall example to help reiterate stuff. But you could pause the podcast just like you could pause cleaning. And I know you want to get to a certain point and like, hey, I want to make sure the dishwasher gets loaded at least before we take the kids to soccer, go out to dinner with friends, or go to this work event, or whatever the case may be. Like when you let them know, like, hey, I got a head cold and I'm moving pretty slow today. It's going to take me longer to clean the kitchen. So you, as a spouse, have a couple of options. One, you could just take them for their word. Like, okay, you have a head cold. This doesn't happen very often. It's not a pattern. So you're not just trying to get out of the work. So you have a head cold. I'm going to help you out if you can. But if you have other tasks or whatever, once you're done with that, see if they need help. However the household chores are broken up, you can help them. Two, you definitely need to be understanding and have grace with them, knowing that the kitchen isn't going to be pristine by the time you leave. If you have to leave at 1 hour and 30 minutes as opposed to 2 hours, which would complete the cleaning. So the kitchen would still be a little bit of a mess, but not as bad as when it first started. So you have to be okay with that. But in both instances, the best thing to do is have grace and patience with your partner. But it's also that underlying trust that I was talking about. Like, I trust that my partner is going to do the best that they can in their current circumstances, in their current situation. So me knowing that and doing that, I'm going to give them grace, which whatever they're doing that's against what their word or what they promised or what we agreed to previously, I'm going to not hold that against them. Because it's, okay, it takes 1.5 hours to clean the kitchen. You told me it's going to take 1.5 hours to clean the kitchen. Why is it taking you 2 hours to clean the kitchen? Even though you're sick, and I know that. Like, that, to me, that doesn't make sense. That's not a very good approach to have. So here's kind of the definitions of patience and grace. So patience is the capacity to accept or tolerate the delay, trouble, or suffering without getting angry or upset. It's also being understanding of the other person's situation. Grace is if they fall short of a task, given the circumstances, you cover for them. Whether that's, I'm not angry or upset, like the patience aspect, or you're, hey, I'm done with my tasks 15 minutes early, but we have stuff to clean up in the kitchen. I'm going to go ahead and help you out. And that is a really good model of marriage over the long haul, because there's going to be periods of our lives, not just like a day, but it could be a couple weeks, couple months, whatever the case may be, even years sometimes, about one of us is in a lull and the other one's covering. You heard the term marriage is 50-50, and then other people have come out like, no, marriage is 100-100. No, it's, okay, 100%. You can't get more than 100%. Out of the 100%, you're each doing 50-50. Well, and each of your 50-50 is your own 100%. So my 100% is out of 50. So if I fall to 40, then the overall marriage drops down from 100% to 90%. Like, so if I'm sick or I'm hospitalized or something, then my wife would cover for that 10% as best as she can. And then vice versa. If, for example, wife just gave birth, she's hospitalized, like she's in the hospital for a couple of days, and she's at home on maternity leave. She had a C-section, so she can't really move or go out and do things, and she's not as mobile as she usually is, then that might drop down to like 20% or 20 points out of her 50. I would do my best to cover for that 30%. But I'm still giving my 100%. It's just how you divvy it up. So that's really the best way I can explain having patience and grace with your spouse and covering for them in that kind of regard. Okay, so the second point we're going to talk about today is the honey-do list. I hate the honey-do list because it basically says, whether it's the woman giving the man the honey-do list or the man giving the woman the honey-do list, it's selfish, because it's trying to make whoever you're giving the honey-do list to being a servant to you or a slave to you. Hey, this task is beneath me, or it's not something that I'm wanting to do, so you need to do that. And, that may have upset some of y'all, and I'm not apologizing for that. I'm sorry that you're upset, but I'm not apologizing for me hating the honey-do list and saying what I said. about this particular thing because I have a better solution. But I'm going to get to that in just a moment. The only part of the honey-do list I like is it's a song by Tim Hawkins. He's a Christian comedian. The song is Honey-Do List. I suggest you look it up on YouTube. It is absolutely hilarious. It's typically what refers to the wife giving the husband a honey-do list, and he's like, hey, I just wanted to come home and rest, but this is my day off. I was going to play some golf with some friends and relax, and for once I got handed a honey-do list as I was walking out the door, and I have to do all of these things and before I can go out and play golf with my friends. So I have to do all these things, and then I'm coming in dead tired, like I fall in the door on my way back into the house as the sun is going down. You giving me the honey-do list just gave you the day off. It's really funny. There's a lot of comedy elements into it that I missed out, but that's the big picture of it. Like, I understand doing the honey-do list actually works for some people. If you're giving a honey-do list, you should be getting a honey-do list as like a trade-off. I still don't particularly like that because it doesn't seem like there's going to be any discussion on what is on the honey-do list. So what I would prefer and what I think is the better solution is you have a family to-do list or a family chore list, like things to do as a family, and you and your wife, or well, like it would be me and my wife, but you and your spouse would sit down and say, hey, these are the tasks that we need to clean, and cleaning is broken down by cleaning the bathroom, cleaning our bathroom, cleaning our room, cleaning the kitchen, cleaning the living room, cleaning the dining room, cleaning the foyer if you have one, cleaning the guest bedrooms, cleaning the guest bathroom or the other bathrooms, so on and so forth. And you have it broken down by that, and then tasks within that. And then since we both hate cleaning the kitchen, we're going to alternate who cleans the kitchen. So you clean the kitchen this week, I'll clean the kitchen next week. As a trade-off, when you clean the kitchen, I'll take care of the guest room and the guest bathroom and the other bathrooms that we have. Try to equal the workout. And then when I'm cleaning the kitchen, you're cleaning the guest rooms. Like that kind of, because you're talking about I hate vacuuming. Okay, well, I hate vacuuming too, but it still needs to get done. So how about you do it this week? I'll do the dusting. And next week, you do the dusting, I'll vacuum. But whatever it is, however you break that down, it's open, honest, loving, straightforward, clear communication is the key. Coming up with a family to-do list, to me, is the best way because it's going to specifically prevent points of friction in the future between the two of you. Of the kitchen didn't get clean, I have to clean the kitchen. Or whatever. And of course, these are all dividing based on your current living situation. For example, if the man brings home it has a job where they can financially support the entire family without the mom having to work, then the mom should be, or the wife should be doing all the household stuff, making sure it's clean, because somebody's bringing in the money, somebody maintains the home. That's the trade-off. But if both of you are working, that's when you divvy everything up. Like another thing to kind of cover what I was talking about previously with covering for people or covering for your spouse. How you would go about doing that is like, hey, it's Thursday. I'm supposed to be cleaning the kitchen Thursday night, but I'm stuck at work because of angry customers or whatever. And I have to go to I have to stay late and deal with this, because if we don't deal with this, then we're losing out on a commission of, I don't know, whatever it is, or whatever the reason is. The spouse should be understanding of that and either go ahead and clean the kitchen or ask, like, okay, when can you clean the kitchen? Like, are you going to be able to do that tomorrow? That would be an example of a conversation to have and where to kind of go with that. The next point that we have is changing circumstances, like life-changing circumstances. One of the certainties in life is that things change. They change constantly, and we have to be willing to adapt to the different situations. Another way to say that is you got to roll with the punches that life throws you. Some of the things that can change in life, when you have kids, or when you have one kid, and then you add another kid, and you add another kid, every time you add a member to your family, everybody's life changes. Even if it's only a pet, everybody's life changes. When you get a promotion or you get let go from your job, life is going to change. Older parents are going to change your circumstances, especially if you're close with them. You may be living in Texas and your parents live in California, but your parents are getting older. They need some help. You want to be closer with them, physically closer to them, so you can spend more time with them, so your kids can spend more time with them. And moving across country or halfway across country, especially from Texas to California, that's a huge sacrifice. That's a huge change. getting pets is going to change how you do things. Like, even if it's just a hamster, you still have to, if you're planning on going on vacation, you have to get somebody to watch over your hamster or watch over your pet. Unforeseen medical expenses could drastically change your lives. Like, you go on for a checkup and you find out that you're like diabetic or something, like diabetic, or you have Alzheimer's, or something that's drastically life changing. That's 100% going to change your marriage and change the dynamic of all your family to be able to adapt to the current circumstances. Another way to kind of say this is, and I'm pretty sure y'all have heard this before, is whenever you're dealt hands in life or dealt cards in life, like, you just have to deal with them. Really trying to say with your hand being dealt is, don't complain about the hand that you're being dealt, because you're wasting your time and your mental capabilities on something that you cannot change. What you should do is, hey, I've been dealt this hand. It sucks, but how can I turn this to my advantage? Just like I talked about earlier, life is unfair. Life unfairly dealt me this hand. So how can I use this hand to take advantage of life? There are so many things that causes changes in our lives, like so many more than I just listed. This is why my core philosophy is open, honest, loving, straightforward, clear communication is key to every successful relationship. Is so important to keep in mind. Like, it's very, like, as soon as something comes up, let your spouse know. Like, that night, like, something came up at work. We want to, as you know, this position is coming available. We want to promote you to this position. This is what you're going to be responsible for. This is what the pay looks like. We're offering you the position. Cool. Give me a couple of days to think about it. And then you go home, talk to your wife and what that entails, or talk to your spouse. Well, hey, great news. I just got offered this promotion. It's this much in pay increase. This is the responsibilities that they told me about. Is there anything that you want to know before I take this position? Or is there anything that we need to discuss further in your eyes? Because I'm done discussing everything that happened to me. I'm wanting to take this position. Here's why. Here's what we can do with it. Here's what our future can look like. We can attain this part of our future sooner. Having that discussion after a life-changing thing happened to you, good or bad. That was a good example. A bad example is you just got fired, or you got demoted, which sucks. But you come home like, so I got demoted today. This is why I got demoted. My pay is going to be this. This is how it's going to affect us. And then you would state, like, I want to stay with the company because I should be able to get that promotion back. They told me that after I correct these things, these 3, 4, 5 things, I can get this promotion back, or I can be re-promoted to this. So it's not going to take very long for me to do that. Whereas if I go start in another job or another position in another company, it's going to take me twice as long or 3 times as long to get to the point where we're going to be. Have that discussion. And I can only start these discussions because I'm not going to have full-blown conversations with myself on a podcast. Like, that's just like a start of the situation, and then you adapt to the situation based on what they say. You don't start speaking, or you don't continue to speak to overspeak everybody just to speak. You want to listen and understand and comprehend what they're saying to move forward in it. One thing that I probably should have said before all that was, before you lay on them the life-altering news, you're like, hey, there's something pretty serious that I need to talk to you about. It's potentially life-changing. Are you open to it now? Or, like, do you have the capability of handling this information, this conversation now, or do you want to talk about it later? And of course, once you agree to talk about it later, you make sure that, okay, well, how much later? Is it time or tomorrow morning, or is it tomorrow after work? Is that what does that look like? And then once you come up with that, you make sure you stick with it. Make sure, if you're the one giving the time, like, hey, I can't talk about this until tomorrow after work is better for me. Make sure when you get to that point at tomorrow after work, that you make sure throughout the day that you're going to be mentally and emotionally prepared to handle that kind of conversation. Because you want to make sure that you're honoring your spouse. They have something that they really want to tell me. I want to know what it is, but I also want to make sure that I have the capability. Like, for example, if I didn't sleep or I only got 2 hours of sleep the last 3 nights, I want to make sure that I'm not having any major life-altering conversations when I'm in that state of mind. I've personally been there in that mindset, And you can't make life decisions in that mindset. For situations like that is why I say you need to come up with a time in the future, like in the next 24 hours, to talk about it. And you need to make sure that you're prepared to handle that kind of conversation when that time comes. And you need to make sure that you're trying your best to make sure that you're ready for it. And if, for example, the sleep issue, if you get 2 hours of sleep the next night and then you try to revisit, be like, I'm really sorry. Like, I really want to have this conversation. I've just been getting horrible sleep the last few days. I think we need to correct this before that. And then so on and so forth. It's that covering each other that I mentioned before. But you both have to be understanding of each other's positions at that time. The last point I want to go over, and this is kind of an add-on, this is a bonus point I want to go over. Your idea of a perfect life is just yours, not your spouse's. Nobody is going to have their perfect life. Nobody is going to have their perfect life because you cannot control everything and everyone in your life. It's like trying to fit your spouse and your life in a mold that's completely unrealistic. It goes back to that unrealistic expectations. The best thing to do is discuss your ideal life with your spouse, or with your. The best thing to do is discuss your ideal life and your spouse's ideal life and merge them together, knowing that both of you need to make concessions with each other. Or I said concessions here, but it's like, hey, I want a 15,000 square foot mansion on 150 acres in Washington or in Wyoming. Well, my spouse wants a 1,500 square foot house in the suburbs of DFW on a quarter of an acre at the most. Okay, well, there's definitely going to be some concessions there, because, okay, well, why Texas? Here's the reasons why Texas. Why Wyoming? Here's Wyoming. Okay, well, pick one. And then, like, you go through each differing opinion or each differing view on that point. And the best time to actually have this conversation is when y'all are engaged. But because we change, one of the only certainties in life is change, this would be a good thing to come up with every so often, like, or on a fairly regular basis, like monthly or quarterly, twice a year, something along those lines, so that you make sure that you're still staying corrected, or that both of your wants and desires are staying corrected, so that, or not corrected, but the changes are being talked about and discussed, so that you both continue to grow together down the same path, as opposed to growing, like you guys are going in the same direction, and then you don't talk about it, and then one of y'all starts veering off, and then you guys aren't growing together anymore. And that's how marriages, or people in marriages, grow apart from each other. And that's why it's like you wake up one day and you don't even realize that you are sleeping next to a stranger. It's like, it's helped to prevent that outcome. Since that was the last point, let's revisit the question. Do you like being forced into a mold, or do you not like being forced into a mold? I assume you don't, because I don't like being forced in a mold. So why would you try to force somebody else into a mold? Because if you force somebody else in a mold to have your perfect life, they're probably going to be absolutely miserable. And to try and think about it another way is the same comedian I mentioned earlier, not Tim Hawkins, but the guy with the dry ice and glass jar. He made a comment about the way that he describes this is the older woman was really happy, gleefully hanging out with friends, like she had the light of life in her every step. But he looked at her husband, and it's like this grouchy old guy mumbling, like hunched over, shuffling around, complaining under his breath, like that kind of relationship. Or do you want to have the relationship where y'all are in your 80s, where other couples are like that, or getting to that point where you're both extremely happy, you're joyful, you're full of life, you're both have the light of life in every step that you take and every word you speak? To me, that is the end goal. That is what I'm wanting for. Someone that we can come together and create a wonderful life while respecting each other's life decisions, but be willing to compromise. That's the word I was looking for earlier. Willing to compromise on what we want in our future for each other so we have the better future with ourselves, or like with as a couple. All right, so now that I'm off that tangent, homework. Start weekly meetings with your partner to discuss some of the logistical dynamics of life together, or what your life will look like together. Like, that's what I found out. That's what I've talked with some of my friends that have had very successful marriages that are still, like, they definitely make time. They're even though they're so busy, they definitely still make time to have these meetings or like this conversation, so you can make small changes week by week as opposed to drastic changes that never stick. In my experience, what I found out is the best changes in life to get to where you want to go are the small step-by-step changes, and the big drastic changes are the ones that are unsustainable. And if today's episode of Consequences of Communication podcast has helped you out, or somebody came to mind when listening to this, please share it with them. Like, subscribe. Let me know down in the comments what your favorite part is, what you hated. So, but I would really appreciate if you all shared this with your friends, family. And I do really appreciate you tuning into this podcast. Thank you so much, especially in today's busy life. And that's why I try to keep these a little bit shorter, these podcast lengths shorter, between that 30 to 40 minute mark. Maybe 25 to 35. That's typically my ideal goal. But next time, we're starting the next. So this was all what I call phase 1, which is laying the groundwork. So now you know my perspective on how relationships should work. Next time, on April 2nd, the day after April Fool's Day, is of Consequences of Communication, is episode 14, getting other people's perspectives. I'll talk to you on the next podcast. Until then, take care and enjoy life.